the first thing that I want to do is I want to open up questions for what your work is for this week. We're taking a little bit of a detour, and we're going to be talking about, or we're going over chapter 3 and 4 of the text, as you've noticed. So I just wanted to know if anybody had any questions after looking at the comma lecture and looking at the comma workshop and looking at chapter 3. If you guys needed any clarification on that, or if you needed anything on my end to kind of answer any questions. Has it been all right? On another question, then I'll. Were you able to understand it, or was it pretty straightforward in terms of getting through it? Has anybody actually
Sorry,
finished
can
the
you
workshop?
repeat it? Can you repeat that?
Sure.
The comma workshops?
Yeah, I was just wondering if anybody had finished it yet.
Oh, okay, no, I haven't even looked at it yet. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I didn't have a meeting on Tuesday, because I want you guys to kind of focus on this, because it will creep up on you. Like, it's not hard, it is time consuming though. That's why we don't have really much of anything else this week. So that's why I want you to focus on reading chapter 3 and 4, going over the comma lecture after. The first thing you have to do is read chapter 3 and 4. Like, that's the first thing. Then the comma lecture, which will go over what was discussed. And then the comma workshop will go over like practical applications and usage. Then by the time that you're done, you can actually do the comma workshop exam, which is on Google Forms. That's due by Tuesday. So those are the things that I would really encourage you all to be doing if you haven't done so already. It will creep up on you. And it's the comma exam you can take over and over as many times as you want. It's worth 100 points, but the cool thing is, if you get any, it'll tell you which ones you got wrong, and you can go and try again. So you can keep taking it until you get 100. So, but that's due by Tuesday. So make sure that you get that done, because think about it. It's a lot of work involved. Like, there's still reading, there's watching the lectures, and my lectures aren't short on those. Those are like 20 to 40 minutes on each of those. Um, one is 20 and one is 40. So make sure you're looking at those and then actually doing the workshop. Otherwise, the workshop is going to just drive you nuts, because you'll have, if you just try and jump into the workshop, you're going to have no idea what's going on. Because everything's going to be on there, and you'll be sitting there banging your head against a wall trying to figure out the exam, as opposed to prepping for it beforehand. It'll take you a long time to do the exam if you don't do the reading and you don't look at the workshops. So that's why we're focusing on that for this week. I want to get that out of the way. This also gives me some time to review the topics that you've chosen. And then that way we're able to kind of take a deeper look into it. And that way I can go ahead and take some time to go ahead and do that. By the end of tomorrow, you should see either your first grade update. So you'll see the updates for the writing journal. You'll see the updates for um, you'll see the updates. So for the 2 writing journals, and a couple of other things that you've turned in, writing sample, you should start seeing those to come back this weekend. And then you'll all go get those in personal folders. And the way that works is you're all going to get individualized emails from me, giving you access to a shared folder. That shared folder is going to have all of your graded work that you've submitted. So that's where that's going to be. You'll get an email from me that says, hey, this is your graded folder. So I've actually already set up those folders. It's just a matter of giving you all your individual invitations. So with that, okay, so I wanted to open up the question for commas. If that's not the case, does anybody want to go ahead and, you know what, this is a good little break. So the next thing that we're going to do is I want to go ahead and review the cinematography video that we have this week, similar to what we're doing with Earworm, but I'm changing it up a little bit, and it's talking about cinematography. If you haven't seen it this week, yet, I would encourage you to, we're going to watch it right now. And then I'm going to ask, so I want to have some discussions about, this is a video about comparisons, comparative analysis. So I want you to be able to kind of look at the differences that are said, and I want you to see how those differences are demonstrated. And then we're going to go ahead and talk about that on the other side. After we do that, we're going to go ahead and open up questions about the topics you've chosen, and what kind of questions you might have um, about that. I haven't reviewed all of them yet. So if you want to jump in and say, hey, the topic I chose was this, then we can go ahead and discuss it, and I can give you some pointers on things to start looking at. So that's going to be the next thing that we're going to do after we review the video. So for those of you on YouTube, you're going to see a little skip right now to go to the discussion. And then, so make sure that you watch the video on cinematography, and then come back to this. Okay, let's go. So what kind of comparisons did you see? And what kind of demonstrations did they make? And was it convincing? Did it work for you? How did it work for you? So let's open up the floor. Let's start with someone who doesn't often usually talk first.
I think it was convincing because they would back up what they were saying with examples of scenes from films, like the James Bond one with the action and how the camera movement like influenced how the action how viewers would see it and would react to it.
Talking about like eye movement and how people are more gravitated to looking at movement. And then they even made a point in like showing like a CNN article saying like, hey, this is the reason why they zoom in on like still photos. Very good. And so what else did you guys notice, or what was another example that was used?
They use like the film itself, like how Bond, like they made the point like Bond does the same thing, pick up women, escape, near death. One just does it better than the other, and making people more interested by, I don't know, like moving the camera, giving like Bond's perspective of it, instead of just shooting like a flat shot.
And they used, and there was two qualities that they were talking about, right?
Yeah, lighting and can't tell the other one. I forgot that.
Camera movement.
Okay, yeah, that one.
Yeah, so movement and lighting, and lighting specifically, kind of what's setting the tone, right? And it was interesting showing kind of the A/B comparisons, right, between, like, for instance, Die Another Day that came out in 2002 and Casino Royale that came out just 4 years later. So this is the kind of stuff I try and pick, because I could just give you a simple like comparison video or something kind of drab. I figured this is just much more fun to look at, and it gets the same point across. What else did you guys think? Was there anything else? Either Nikita or Sid or anybody? What did you guys think? Or Brianna?
Piggybacking off of the same thing Gabriella and Freddie said, I also noticed like towards the end they were really emphasizing the camera movements, how like the thing that was going up, they pulled the camera up with it to show that it was like the distance covered or whatever.
And you notice, and this is kind of similar to the next paper that we're going to be talking about, the next big paper that you're going to do, the hot news topic, the hot news paper. You notice that as they were looking at the different variables of like lighting and camera movement, the control variable was, it was the same subject matter, right? It was the same film series, James Bond. So in a similar spirit is what you're going to do with your hot newspaper. Your hot newspaper is, you're going to look at the same subject matter, the same content in terms of what news story you look at. But the difference is you're going to look at different news organizations' coverage of that same story. That way you can see the similarities and differences in coverage. And so very similar to how we did this A/B comparison between one movie and the other in terms of the James Bond cinematography video, you're going to do that similar kind of comparative analysis with your hot newspaper, where you'll look at, hey, CNN made it a big deal to mention this about the story, but Al Jazeera actually was more focused on this. And so that's what you're going to be looking at in terms of making those comparisons. And that's going to be the big part of your hot newspaper. And so essentially what the hot newspaper is going to do is you'll look at 3 newspaper articles that are about the same story, the exact same story from around the same day, give or take a day or two. And you're going to analyze, compare and contrast what the differences in coverage is. And so the control variable will be the story, whereas the other variables will be, what was the news source and how did they cover it? And so you're really just kind of doing a comparative analysis of these newspaper articles. And the cool thing that I would want you to get out of this is that the tendency for people, particularly in undergrad, is they get one source talking about what they need and they're like, oh, okay, this source covered it, I'm good. As opposed to getting a multitude, a diversity of sources that ends up helping out and giving a much rounder picture of what it is that that encapsulates that story or encapsulates that data. You're looking at it from multiple perspectives. And as we'll talk about when we talk about research, is you want to make sure that you have a diversity of sources, in large part to get away from any kind of baked-in biases. You want to make sure that any biases that are in the paper, if you just pick one article or one source and just focus on that, whatever agenda, whatever bias, whatever motives that were in that paper, you now own, whether you meant to or not, because you're only focusing on one source. And so that's why we're going to be focusing on having a diversity of sources, even though they're talking about the same thing. And you'll find that extraordinarily useful because you'll have a much greater depth and understanding of the subject matter. You're not just going to have this one-dimensional surface level understanding of the subject matter. And that's often what happens in grad school, where you're looking at papers and you're like, oh, okay, I got a source on this. Well, let me get another one. And it actually will build up and build up and build up. So you can talk about one subject, but have multiple sources on it. So you don't have to be so dependent on one source. And it's really, really useful. So I know a lot of undergrads will go, how on earth do I write like a 20, 30 page paper like that? Well, a lot of it is about research. A lot of it is about doing the legwork before you even start writing, to have the kind of knowledge that you need in the subject matter. The more preparation you do before you even start writing the paper, the easier it is to write the paper itself. And that's why we're going to go through all these different steps. So you can imagine this course as being one long process of writing one paper. And we're detailing how to look at news articles, how to look at journal articles, how to look at books, how to look at different forms of media like we're doing now, documentaries, things like that, and taking that whole breadth of information and then being able to distill it into something that's really interesting and looking at a particular debate. And you'll have this kind of mini subject matter expert knowledge in order to discuss it. So that's going to be the cool thing that's kind of the overarching goal of the class. And so all of these skills that we're honing in on week by week, bit by bit, all of them are going to build on to each other, from comma usage, making sure that that your usage of commas, of punctuation in general, of grammar, syntax, you get the fundamentals down pat, but then on top of that, making sure that we get citations, research methods, making sure that we know how to use databases correctly and smartly. So you're going to love this when we get to do database research, and I think in about a week or so, when we start talking about looking at the news, I'm going to show you how to use Google News to hone down specifically by date and subject matter, so you're not spending 4 hours trying to search for something. When we get to searching for journal articles, I'm going to show you how to use the OneSearch to go from 5 hours of research to an hour of research, or 2 hours of research to find what you're looking for. I'm going to show you how to do things a lot smarter, and that you're not going to be banging your head against a wall. And that way it's not so intimidating to look for information or look for subject or look for journal articles or look for newspapers or look for sources. I want to make that job easier and less daunting for you when you're not just given this task here, but also in other courses, and particularly in grad school where you're going to be on your own when it comes to finding that kind of thing. And that's where we're going to be largely focused on. So research, being able to use our research tools is going to be a big thing. So that being said, I kind of want to open up the floor to what are your topics? Like, what is it that you are interested in doing for those of you who haven't already kind of discussed it? Or if you have discussed it already, maybe there's something that you've changed or refined as you decided to turn in your form on Tuesday. So what did you guys pick? And we'll just go down the line. So Brianna, what did you pick?
For my topic?
Mhm.
Okay, I picked violence in video games,
Oh, cool.
to be honest. Yeah, I picked that because I'm like revolved around so many people who play video games, and they have so many like their opinions on it.
Mhm.
And not only that, but I think like if I've seen news reports, a lot of it and stuff, and I've seen people act out the way they act out in video games. So I thought it would be cool just to a little branch out a little bit more on that topic.
Nice. Are you psych major by any chance?
Yes.
Oh, you're gonna love it. And let me guess, do you want to get in, you're gonna get a child psych?
Yep.
Oh, then this is right up your alley. This is great.
Yep. I want to know
So-
how it works.
One of the things I want you to look up, because this is going to help you later on, is I want you to look up the Lieberman. You're going to want to write this down. It's called the Lieberman Subcommittee on Video Game Violence. It was in the early 90s. And this is when the Senate was actually debating whether or not there should be government imposed regulation and censorship of the material in video games. There was a discussion of whether or not video games caused either juvenile delinquency or juvenile violence. And so that actually became the reason that the ESRB was formed. So you know the little the little boxes at the rating system on video games that say T for teen, M for mature, E for everyone on a video game box, the black and white box.
Yes.
The reason those exist is because of that Senate subcommittee.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay. What was that called again? The Lieberman.
So the Lieberman Senate Subcommittee on Video Game Violence. Joseph Lieberman of Connecticut was a big thing. Hillary Clinton actually jumped in on this as well. A couple of games that they talked about were Night Trap, Mortal Kombat, the first one, like from '93, and Doom.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know all of those games.
The other one that you're also going to want to look up, which will be a little bit more recent, which you might find interesting for your actual newspaper story, is called Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and the level is called No Russian.
I think I know which one.
Yeah, the one where you're an undercover CIA operative and you're in a Russian terrorist cell and you're part of a terrorist attack to shoot up an airport.
Okay.
And you're given the option to mow down civilians in the game.
Oh wow.
There's actually a warning on when you start the game saying if you want to do it or not.
Okay.
So yeah, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 No Russian. It was a huge story when it came out about video game violence, because you were given the agency to either, because you can walk through the whole level and not shoot anybody until you get to the end when the cops are shooting back at you. Then you have to fight, but you don't have to kill any civilians in that game, in that level, if you don't want to.
Oh, okay.
It's a very and it's very disturbing.
That's crazy.
Yeah. You can even
'Cause
look
I
up
do
some
know-
reactions about it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I do know some video games. Well, mostly all video games, they require a story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of them. So Yeah, I'll definitely look into that one.
Yeah, that one will be really good. The other one that you can also look up for your news story would be um, after Stoneman Douglas, when Trump did the kind of double down on the idea that of video game violence and brought in members of the video game industry in for like a summit, like that also could be a good story to look at. So to be clear, the news story that you look at, it doesn't have to be from like, last month. It can be from, a couple of years ago. And I'll show you how to find that in the databases. So when we start talking about it next week, Brianna, remind me when we start looking at this stuff, I'll show you how we can look up those newspaper articles specifically from like 2011.
Okay, perfect. Will do.
Cool. Yeah, but
Thank you.
start digging a little bit now, even if you're just, and here's the thing, like at this point, if you're even just watching like YouTube videos and commentary and videos on it, just to kind of get an idea of what was going on, that's totally cool. I want you to at least, because those videos, you can't necessarily cite them right now because of the newspaper stuff, because we're looking at newspapers, but those videos, like, let's say, like, I know Freddie, you're doing like Medicare for All, right?
Yeah.
I actually changed it to police reform.
Okay, police reform. Okay, so when we're talking about like, body cameras, or if we're talking about video game violence, if you watch like some commentaries from Brookings or TED Talks or anything like that, you can't cite those right now, but they may mention stuff that you can look up, like things that were mentioned. So it's not a bad idea to just kind of like casually just like chill on YouTube for like an hour or two looking at stuff, because and taking some notes, like, oh, they mentioned that, I could probably look that up. Or because then by doing that, you're not like sitting at a computer going, well, what words do I type to get what I'm looking for? And so that's always a good idea to get started. That's what I do. Like, for instance, if I don't know something that's going on that, or I'm not particularly familiar with, I'll watch like a TED Talk, or I'll watch news reports, or I'll watch like a whole news thing, like a whole news like feature on it, or 60 Minutes, something that goes into it that I can then start, picking apart. So that's a good way of getting started. Cool. And then
Thank you.
awesome. And Freddie, and then you've talked about it before, but you were talking about police reform. Did you know specifically what kind of police reform, or are you kind of just or are you still figuring that one out?
I believe I put on the form like, should there be increased requirements to become a police officer? Because I told you like how like my family, how like my brother wants to become a cop, so that's why it kind of interested me. And then plus everything going on in the past year with like George Floyd and like the protests over the summer, I just felt like it was a topic to talk about.
Right. And like, for instance, there's some really interesting stuff that got brought up, not even just George Floyd, but before that. There's been some interesting stuff about de-escalation. And there's been a lot of comparison to DC to the London Metro Police, because the London Metro Police are a pretty big police force, and many of their officers are unarmed. And one of the largest things that they have is de-escalation training. Like, that is a large part of their training, is actually being able to de-escalate a situation. Whereas in typically an American police force standard academy training, de-escalation has less hours than time at the shooting range. So that would be something interesting to look at. So specifically de-escalation training, and I think Vice did something about looking at London police and looking at de-escalation.
It's funny because I've been watching a lot of Vice News about it, and they actually posted a video a couple days ago about how the NYPD is getting like lawsuits from some protesters. So I watched that.
Yeah, well, because of not George Floyd, but what was his name? I Can't Breathe. Because of the chokeholds, those are against like that was against New York policy to begin with. They weren't supposed to do chokeholds to begin with. Like, that's against policy. But they did it anyway. So, and the thing is, there wasn't really any Freddie Gray, right? I think what it was. There wasn't a lot of repercussions, regardless of the fact that they were going against their own manual, their own standards and practices. So I think that would be something really good to look at. Nice. Gabriella.
I'm doing mine on whether there should be term limits of Supreme Court justices.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's badass. I
I feel
love
like
it.
after last year with Justice Ginsburg's death, like it was a hot topic before they appointed Barrett.
Well, it's been since Scalia died, really,
Yeah.
there's been a lot of that talk too. And so that would be interesting to look at, because here's the thing that they're doing, and this is actually what Trump did, is that Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, and
Kavanaugh?
Brett Kavanaugh are all relatively young. They're in their 50s and 60s, which means that conceivably, if some of these people are living to their 90s, that means that they're going to be on the court for 4 decades.
That's crazy.
And so, if because of lifetime appointments, you are more inclined to pick a younger Supreme Court justice, because then that seat is held from either a Republican or a Democratic president for a lot longer. And for the time being, as a result of what former President Trump did, that the Supreme Court is going to have a conservative ideological bend for like a generation, unless somebody either dies or retires that's on the conservative seat. And that doesn't look like that's going to happen. If anything, it looks like Breyer wants to retire. So
Yeah.
so Biden may only get one Supreme Court pick, because I think Stephen Breyer wants to retire, but that was a Clinton appointee. So it's a wash. He's not gaining anything. He's not going to gain a seat.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so, but the problem with that is it becomes extraordinarily partisan, right? Like, the whole idea of the Supreme Court, like it makes a whole big purpose when it comes to, because if Hillary Clinton had won, then there would have been like a ideologically liberal seat on the bench for, a generation. So it makes the actual, the presidency, it politicizes the court through the president, through the presidential election. So that's a big thing too. So I think it's great. There's a lot to cut your teeth on, because people weren't just talking about this before Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This has been going on for a long time, and there's a lot of scholarship on it, on whether or not that's a good idea or not.
Yeah, I think just last year, I think they wanted to introduce like a bill, but obviously it wouldn't get passed because of the Senate. I think they wanted to limit it to like 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I heard about that. Yeah, that's an interesting thing, looking at reform like that. So I think that's great. I think that's a fantastic one. What's your major?
Political science.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right up your alley. I love it. I absolutely love it. Fantastic. Do you have who are you taking this quarter in poli-sci?
I'm taking Field and Villegas.
Anthony Field was one of my advisors in grad school. He's awesome. So are you taking his national security class or what?
I'm taking international relations.
Yes, very good. Well, if you see him, if he has a synchronous lecture, tell him that Justin Valero said hello.
Okay, I will.
And then what else? I always used to pop into his office when we were still in there. But great, awesome, Nikita. And then Paras and said, what do you guys want? What did you guys want to pick?
Yeah, so I just ended up choosing a cryptocurrency for mine. It's just like what we talked about last time, pretty much.
Cool, I like that. There's a lot of questions about whether or not it to keep it as a. So, are you starting to find some stuff about the reasons why it should or should not be recognized by governments as a monetary unit?
Yeah, so pretty much like if it should be regulated by government or not, because right now it's pretty much like fiat money versus, I guess, Bitcoin. So
right, but here comes the rub, right? If it's regulated, that means it's recognized.
Yeah, that's true.
That is the thing that's kind of like the sticky wicket with this thing, is that if you regulate it as money, then that means you're recognizing it as money. And that's the problem right now with because it's not necessarily a universally recognized currency. And if that was a universally recognized currency, what would that do to the volatility of the currency markets? So that's something that people are worried about, is that because Bitcoin is relatively volatile. Like, could you imagine if that got onto the market and another Mount Gox happened? Like, that would be really, really, really bad for the market. You know about Mount Gox, right?
No, I actually haven't. I'm still like looking into this stuff.
Look it up. That will be something that I think you'll find really interesting. It's called Mount Gox, mt.gox. It was a Bitcoin repository that got hacked.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah, it happened a couple of years ago, but it tanked it tanked Bitcoin for a while. So that's a really, really cool thing. But the thing is that if you have big fluctuations like that in the currency market, that would be scary. That's why a lot of people in the financial markets are nervous about it. But then Elon Musk goes and spends, that would be a great story, by the way, for your hot newspapers. The Elon Musk buys like 1.5 billion in Bitcoin or something like that.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a great story to look at for your hot newspaper.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then Sid.
My topic was on homelessness.
Oh, cool. What particularly about homelessness would you be interested in doing?
I think I want to keep it general, like on choosing a few policies where it's not really like black and white. So I was looking at like affordable housing and reasons why this hasn't been like a solution, or reasons why it hasn't been talked about.
I think there's something that you might find really useful and interesting when it comes to this. It's called Measure H. Have you heard about this?
No.
So Measure H passed about 2.5 years in 2018, and it was a big initiative to increase taxes in LA County, and the taxes would directly go towards helping with development, helping with like basically taking in tax dollars and throwing money at the problem. That was in a very kind of like crude way of describing Measure H. That's what was going on. That different homeless shelters, nonprofits, care providers, they were going to get supplemental funds from Measure H dollars. And the results of Measure H have been kind of hit and miss, because now we're about 3 years out. So we're actually starting to measure like what the implications and impact have been, and if it's actually been successful.
Yeah.
So it's a big thing in LA County. There was a huge fight over it too, and it passed. An increased sales tax in the county for a massive influx of cash into homeless programs. Now, whether or not it's worked has been a gigantic debate in Los Angeles politics.
Yeah, because I've read how like after providing affordable housing, like there's the issue of like having homeless people who use drugs mixed up with people who are legit only looking for a home, and then creating problems. So that was one of the policies that I was looking at.
Yeah, well, and one of the big things to look at is just how bad NIMBYism is in areas with that need affordable housing. Are you familiar with NIMBYism? If you're not, it's okay. I'll explain it.
Thank you.
It's called Not in My Backyard.
Okay.
NIMBY. And so the issue would be, hey, because California on the books has pretty strict requirements on what should be on like what part of developments need to be affordable housing, which can be middle income or luxury housing. There's supposed to be a mandate that a certain percentage of development in a city needs to be affordable housing. And if you don't do that, you get sanctioned or you get funds pulled or things like that. But the problem is it's been really hard to regulate, and Sacramento's been kind of dragging their feet on it because it's extraordinarily unpopular. At the state level, it's popular. At the local level, where a lot of these decisions are made, are extraordinarily unpopular because it still leaves the power of development and zoning to cities. Well, those people are elected by the communities that they live in. So are you really so there's this interesting kind of political problem right now, whereas are you going to be more attentive to the people who elected you and who are your neighbors, or politicians in Sacramento who are just telling you to do this because they think it's the right thing to do, which it may very well be. But the thing is that the political pressures are really lopsided. There was a really good story that happened in South Whittier, where there was a section of a school district that they weren't using. They weren't using it. It was just a big plot of land, like they were using. It was just like a field that it was just completely undeveloped, and it was part of the school district, and they weren't doing anything with it. So they sold it. And they sold it to a developer, and the developer said that they were going to build a 4-story apartment building that would also include affordable housing. And the neighborhood went insane. They were like, you can't do this. You're going to lower property values, which if you look at California, it doesn't matter what happens. Apparently property values are just they just keep going up no matter what happens. But they went nuts. So if you look up like Whittier School District and then like develop and like housing, you'll see a whole bunch of stuff where they just went nuts. And it's a big part of NIMBYism, where somebody asked me one day, like, what is the biggest problem about housing in California? And I said, we are the biggest problem. Because where we need to make developments and where we need to do that, those actual communities reject it. And what happens is that even if you do get off the ground with a housing development, by the time that you've gone through city councils, by the time you've gone through zoning commissions, by the time you've got through the neighborhoods having their hair on fire, that 70% affordable housing turns into 40%. And then by the time that you've gone and sunk all your money into development fees and zoning, well, then that's 40% turns into 20%. And then by the time that you've actually built the thing, it ends up becoming mid to luxury apartments by the time everything's said and done, because the amount of money that's put in, you need to be able to have either middle income or luxury apartments to make up the investment that you've made on this housing development. So in California, so that's a big problem that's happening right now in terms of like housing policy, is that we want to build it, we need to build it, but we don't really have the will to do it at the community and city level, at the municipal level. The counties and the states really want to, light a fire under all the cities' butts to do it, but they're just not moving. And the question is, how do you get them to do that? Because we're facing a mass exodus in California of people leaving the state. And San Francisco has already shown us that you can't sustain a city on tech executives and lawyers living in the city. To the point where, you're paying $2,000 a month to live in a shoebox with 6 people. And what's happening is that people who were living in low to middle income housing are moving away. And those are the people who are the plumbers, the electricians, the mechanics, the people making $60,000 to $80,000 a year who can't afford to live on a $2,500 mortgage. So they're moving to Oakland. So they're moving to Fresno. They're moving outside of the city. It's the same thing that's happening here. I mean, look at the prices in Rialto, for instance, how have gone up over the past 10 years. Because people are leaving Los Angeles. They're leaving Whittier. They're leaving Hacienda Heights. They're going east. And property values have gone up and up and up and up and up in San Bernardino County as a result. And so you're starting to see this kind of movement east that is definitely becoming a huge housing problem, because the thing is that all of these affordable housing units that we have in San Bernardino, like I remember when I first got to San Bernardino, I think I was paying like $900 for a 2-bedroom, something crazy. And it was just redone because the housing market didn't demand it. That same apartment unit's probably about $1,600 now in San Bernardino, just over the course of 5 years. That's crazy. It's almost doubled. And so the thing is that the housing crisis is starting to creep into San Bernardino County, Imperial County, and that it's like a infection. It's like COVID. It's like going further and further and further out. So sorry, I didn't mean to be on a soapbox, but like there's a lot going on when it comes to homelessness and housing, that it's such a moving target. So the thing that I would do is just focus on a policy and then like hit it.
Okay, because I usually have the trouble of providing information. Like professors put the limit of how many pages you can have,
Mhm.
and I am never able to hit that, like the minimum. And I was like, well, maybe if I include multiple policies, like I'll have enough information to hit that.
Oh, don't worry. You hit one with housing, you're going to be busy. If me
Gotcha.
explaining it has kind of demonstrated that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a
Okay.
good topic. Like, trust me, if it wasn't a good topic, I would have told you not to do it. But the fact that I rambled for about 10 minutes
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
good sign. And I know a lot about it. So I was pretty active. I've been active in LA politics for a long time. So
Thank you.
if you need help, I'm more than happy to kind of guide your way. And for those of you who are watching this on YouTube later on, like feel free to email me if you have the availability to jump in, even on here or in office hours. Please feel free to do so. But at the very least, email me. With that being said, that was all I had for you guys today. We're hitting about the hour mark anyway. It's 4:53. So hopefully this was really good for you guys. And this encourages, I don't know if there's a group chat I don't know if there's a group me for the class already, but if there is, let them know, what it was like to jump on, because I was able to talk to every single one of you about your topics. And I like doing this. Like, this is my most favorite thing to do, is to brainstorm your topics with you and talk about research. Like, that's one of my favorite things to do. So feel free to pick my brain. If I don't know it, I will help you find out. But other than that, I think that's all I have. So does anybody have any other questions as we're walking out this week? So with that, make sure that you finish up all the comma stuff, and then make sure, if you haven't done it already, the Why Schools Kill Do Schools Kill Creativity Writing Journal 3, knock that. If you haven't done it, just do it tonight. That's something you can just knock out. That way you can focus primarily on the comma stuff. Then next week, we'll start talking about researching the news. And that'll give us a kind of a better idea of what's going on. Don't worry, the first paper, we're going to take our time with it. So don't freak out. You're going to have time to formulate, draft. We'll have discussions about it. There's going to be plenty to look at as we're working on it, on the first paper. And there's going to be example papers, and you'll see a whole bunch of stuff. So I think that'll make you feel a little better. But other than that, good job, everybody. Make sure you read chapter 3 and 4, do the common exam, do the writing journal. Cool. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.